Okay, everyone, so this is Dennis Nayer, the Director of Research, Development, and Training for the New York State Association of Chiefs of Police. I'm going to do a short audio podcast right now with Chief Retired Mike Ranalli. Chief Ranalli served as the Chief of Police for the Village of Glenville Police Department, and prior to that was with the Town of Colony Police Department for 22 years. He's a former leader of their tactical team, and right now he's a program manager for Lexipol. Ton of information, very well known on the speaking circuit. So we're going to talk about his presentation that he just gave to the State Association of Chiefs of Police at our conference, and it's on tactical decision making under stress. So, Mike, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So the first and main question is, in the most generic sense, can you describe for the listeners how decision making is affected in high stress situations and how those decisions can be interpreted by the courts?
Well, first off, we'll start with non-stressful situations. So what a lot of people take for granted is that any decision takes time. So nothing happens instantaneously. So it takes time to think, to perceive something, to think about it, decide what you're going to do about it, and then actually execute what we call the motor program to respond to that. So that's under normal circumstances. That's a process that takes time. Now, when you add stress, what happens is that the body, without getting into a lot of details, but the body releases a lot of hormones that help to prepare the body for survival. In other words, you become, your heart rate increases, your blood pools to your major organs, and so forth. So what that can do is also give you tunnel vision so that you're focusing on what the actual threat is and not necessarily seeing other stimuli. So the time that it takes under normal circumstances now might be increased because of the complexity of the situation that you're facing. So and the problem with the courts is that, say, like for instance, a case I talked about where it was expected that the very fraction of a second in time that a person who was a threat is no longer a threat, that the officer had to have stopped firing his weapon at the person, at the threat. Well, the reality is it takes time for it to register that the person is now down, and for that new motor program, which is to stop pulling the trigger, to be executed. So the courts, the way decisions and information is presented to juries, without proper foundation laid by experts, the whole situation can be misinterpreted, and potentially officers may face consequences that are not fair or not under the circumstances because they're just reacting as human beings.
And someone just watching that or seeing that an officer continue to fire without knowing that physiology and what's going on in their minds could make an incorrect assumption that the officer could have done something different.
Correct. Not only juries, but actually also department administrators could make a decision referencing, or excuse me, recommending discipline when the reality is that the officer may have just been responding on circumstances they couldn't really control.
So as a follow-up, an important follow-up actually, what type of training do you think is the most relevant to facilitate the most appropriate response by any officer in a high-stress situation?
Well, the first, in the premise of the whole class that I just completed at the conference was, when you have discretionary time, understand what your limitations are and try not to put yourself in a situation where you have to make those split-second, as they call them, the Graham versus Connor decisions. So pre-planning, good tactical decision-making, trying to put the person that you have to deal with at an inconvenient, in other words, surprising them or something, doing something other than the normal breach and entry of a residence, for instance, is the classic case where things can go bad very quickly. But you have to look, are there other ways to handle the situation, such as doing a traffic stop and taking the person off that way, and so on. So the other thing to consider is, first off, everything starts with policy. You have to have good, sound policies. And then you have to train to the policies, and then you have to have good first-line supervision to reinforce the policies. So the decision-making process that I just described is of no good if the agency's not following the policies that require it. If the supervisors are not giving feedback to officers that maybe jumped into a situation that they should not have. So first and foremost, good policy, good training, good supervision. And then there's also stress mitigation techniques that can be used, breathing, controlled breathing, and also reality-based training. You train as you fight as you train. So when you do reality-based training, you get that heightened state. You get to some extent that same hormonal dump into your system. So you're preparing your body for that type of event. So when the real one happens, it won't be quite as severe.
So it's almost just that old analogy, the time to fix a leaking roof is now when it's raining. And it's just same with training as well, that the training should be done in advance of the situation so that the response is appropriate.
Correct. Yep.
So now, just as a final follow-up, what sources can you recommend for officers to expand their knowledge and training, or for police administrators to provide that training for their officers?
Well, one that really jumps out at me right away is just the how ubiquitous video is now. There's so many valuable videos. There's also a lot of useless videos on YouTube, but there's a lot of valuable videos on YouTube that officers can take, critique. It's a great learning tool for supervisors, first-line supervisors. Find some good ones. At the end of a briefing, sit down with your officers, show them on the computer, discuss it, break it apart, constructively, not trying to make fun of anybody, not trying to belittle or demean the officers or the agency that had to go through a tough situation, but to try and take advantage of the fact that that information's out there and learn from it.
And now, in your capacity, you're the program manager at Lexipol. Can you just maybe tell the listeners what Lexipol can help them with?
Well, Lexipol provides the policy, and within the policy are these decision-making processes that I discussed in relation to today's our crisis intervention policy. Talks about strategic disengagement and how, in some situations, depending upon the threat, the source of the threat, if anybody else is at risk, that sometimes the best thing to do might be to at least partially disengage, if not fully disengage. But again, that's a complicated process. But through anything, foot pursuits, vehicle pursuits, inherently dangerous to police officers, use of force. We require in our policies use of all of those types, review of all of those decisions that were made for the foot pursuit or the vehicle pursuit or the use of force to see if the officers are making sound decisions and that they actually are exercising proper officer safety. It's not it's designed to be constructive, not critical.
Is there a website you can recommend for Lexipol?
Yep. Anybody can go to www.lexipol.com.
Thank you. That was awesome information. I sat through the presentation, and I thought it was on point, as always. So, Chief Ranalli, thank you, and much appreciated.
Thank you. All right.